Coming up on Network Africa. Sudan's army declares full control of Khartoum state following battles with paramilitary rapid support forces. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa to meet with US President Donald Trump at the White House in Washington. Plus, former Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Augustin Ponyo, sentenced to hard labor on corruption charges. Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Olarinde. We begin in Sudan, where the army says it has taken full control of Khartoum state following 2 years of fighting with the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF. The army, in a statement published by Sudanese news agency, says the RSF has been entirely pushed out of Khartoum and is completely free of rebels. The announcement comes nearly 2 months after the military recaptured Khartoum city, including the presidential palace, from its rivals in a major victory. Footage from the city captures Sudanese servicemen firing into the air while driving through the city of Omdurman. Locals also walking down the streets carrying their personal belongings. Since the onset of the fighting between the armed forces and the RSF in April 2023, more than 20,000 people have been killed and 33,000 injured, and about 12 million others forcibly displaced from their homes. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa will be meeting with US President Donald Trump at the White House on Wednesday. It's a meeting that might be tense after President Trump accused South Africa's government of allowing a genocide to take place against white minority farmers. The country strongly rejected the allegation, and President Cyril Ramaphosa pushed for a meeting with Mr. Trump in an attempt to salvage the relationship with the US, which is said to be at the lowest point since the end of apartheid system of racial segregation in 1994. The visit comes at a critical time, even as global trade dynamics continue to shift. Programs like the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, are currently under review, and reciprocal US tariffs could return as early as July. Well, Mr. Trump has recently launched a series of accusations at South Africa's government, including that it is seizing land from white farmers, enforcing anti-white policies, and pursuing an anti-American foreign policy. Mr. Ramaphosa says he hopes to correct what he calls damaging mischaracterizations during this meeting, which would be Mr. Trump's first with an African leader at the White House since he returned to office. Well, some citizens in South Africa worry their leader might get Zelensky, and it's a reference to the public bashing Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance handed out to the Ukrainian president in the infamous Oval Office meeting back in February. Well, joining us for more on this is Chris Hattingh. He's the Executive Director at the Center for Risk Analysis, CRA, in South Africa. Thank you so much for your time on the program.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the opportunity. It should be a very easy discussion to try and make sense of what's going to happen in Washington.
Indeed, in a few moments from now, we should be seeing, pictures of that meeting even after it happens. But how do you envisage, this meeting would go? What do you expect from this, the two leaders sitting down, speaking together?
So this might be a little bit reductionist, but I think it could go one of two ways. So the good scenario and then the bad scenario. The good scenario is that most of the discussion, the luncheon, the media engagement, all of that is focused more on trade and investment matters. The bad scenario, the worst case scenario, is that the focus is on things like the quote unquote refugee issue, that it's on expropriation and property rights, that it's on the case that South Africa brought against Israel at the ICJ, that it's more of those populist, emotive notions that President Trump and some of his colleagues have focused on. It's very interesting that the delegations are as big as they are, and on the US side, you've got serious sort of heft in the room, not least of which, of course, Elon Musk and various other government representatives. It's interesting that the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, isn't reported to be part of the US delegation. But then, of course, on the South African side, you have the government representatives and a few business people and some South African golfers, showing perhaps that South Africa realizes they need to engage in some unconventional diplomacy to get a real purchase with President Trump.
Indeed, and you've given a long list of issues. There's the land expropriation issue, there's the ICJ case, the refugee asylum, there's the trade tariffs, that long list. But what do you think should be the priority for President Ramaphosa during this meeting?
So we just had this afternoon the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, deliver his third budget in 2025. It looks like everything will be smooth sailing and pass. The President, where possible, he and his colleagues should build on that positive fiscal momentum. It sends a good signal to international markets, to investors looking at South Africa, that the GNU has now put together a budget. Of course, there are various pieces of legislation that need to be passed in Parliament, but it's a good start. So for the President and his delegation to build on that, focusing on growth and investments, looking at critical minerals, how important those are for South Africa and for the US, and looking at where there could be additional South African investments in the US and additional American investments in South Africa to ensure more job creation. South Africa comes into this meeting in the context of a low growth economy. Between 2012 and 2023, South African GDP averaged only 0.8% growth per year. We need as many sources of investment as possible, domestic and, of course, foreign. The US, given that it is South Africa's second most important export market from an agricultural, from a critical minerals, from an automotive point of view, those benefits and relationships need to be retained and built on wherever possible and indeed expanded. So I think if the President can focus matters on investment, job creation, and trade, that would be a highly successful visit. And also, just given the sort of heightened rhetoric that there has been from the Trump administration, the fact that the meeting in and of itself is taking place, I think, is a good sign that you wouldn't have expected given the rhetoric. So let's see if South Africa can use the foot in the door that it has today.
Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. After the meeting, I think we'll be calling you back to review all that has played out. But just before I let you go, looking ahead, what are your predictions, for the future trajectory of the US-South Africa relations?
I'll try and answer that by almost answering the question in a roundabout way. I think for many countries, especially in Africa, they're going to have to deal with a much more transactional administration in the US for the time of President Trump's second administration. He doesn't generally like wide trade agreements between the US and sort of blocks. He wants country-to-country investments and engagements, trade agreements, maybe on a bilateral level too. So for South Africa, for other African countries that are looking to grow, especially in this year, so countries such as Nigeria, Rwanda, Kenya, with such potential, they need to figure out what can they bring to the table and what should the US bring to the table if the US government and US companies want to invest in countries like South Africa and countries on the rest of the continent. I think South Africa has benefited from 1994 from having a bit of a moral superpower status, given the first government by former President Nelson Mandela coming out of apartheid. A lot of that has now been is now at an end in its engagements with the US. It needs to be very hard-nosed, engage on terms that favor economic growth and investment. That will benefit South Africa in the long term with the Trump administration, but also build up its investment appeal around the rest of the world. I don't think it should focus exclusively on just giving everything for the sake of optics to the Americans. They need to find out where are there areas of overlap and possible growth and investment agreements, and then parlay those to other agreements with other countries and regions as well.
Thank you so much, Chris Hatting, Executive Director of the Center for Risk Analysis in Johannesburg. Thank you. Or more on economic news from South Africa, the consumer inflation rose slightly in April, climbing to 2.8% from 2.7% in March. Statistics South Africa released the latest consumer price index earlier, reflecting changes in the cost of a standard basket of goods. The data comes amid a mixed economic outlook, with economists split on the inflation trend. Food and non-alcoholic beverages saw a notable increase, rising to 4%, and that's the highest annual rate since September 2024. Hot beverages in particular spiked sharply, with annual inflation hitting 15.2%. A federal judge is warning that the U.S. President Donald Trump's administration could be held in contempt of court for deporting a group of migrants to South Sudan. Judge Brian Murphy said the removals could violate his order last month, barring the U.S. government from sending migrants to third countries without being given meaningful opportunities to challenge their deportation. In an emergency submission to the judge, immigration attorneys said a flight carrying a dozen people had landed in South Sudan on Tuesday. It's the latest showdown between President Trump and the federal courts as the Republican president seeks to deliver on a campaign pledge for mass deportations. Attorneys from the National Immigration Litigation Alliance asked Judge Murphy on Tuesday for an emergency order to prevent the removals, which they said had included citizens of Myanmar and Vietnam. As South Sudan drafts a permanent constitution ahead of its first democratic elections, the UN mission in the country has hosted a workshop to empower women from political parties, civil society, and the National Constitutional Review Commission to participate in shaping their nation's future. Participants highlighted the importance of ensuring inclusivity and the incorporation of South Sudanese women's rights and gender equality. To amplify South Sudanese women's voices and foster a more inclusive and representative governance framework in the country, UN Women says it's actively assisting the women to participate in political processes through comprehensive training, strategic capacity building, and robust advocacy initiatives.
Women participation enhance our advocacy of the marginalized groups because women bring unique perspective and on issues of their needs, but also in issues of their rights into the constitution-making process. They are able to play a vital role in building coalitions, fostering dialogue with different political parties, but also ensuring that different groups participate in the constitution-making processes.
From participating in consultations to drafting gender-sensitive provisions, women have a key role to play in developing these. Their participation should be prioritized not just as procedural requirement, but also as fundamental.
When women are fully engaged in constitution making, peace building, and governance, outcomes are more inclusive, equitable, and durable. The legitimacy and the sustainability of South Sudan's future constitution depends on the extent to which it reflects the diverse realities and aspirations of all its people, particularly women, who have for too long been excluded from key decision-making process.
A former Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo has been sentenced to a decade's forced labor for corruption. Augustin Ponyo was found guilty of embezzling about $245 million of public funds by the Congolese Constitutional Court on Tuesday, alongside Deogratias Mutombo, the former governor of the DR Congo's central bank. Part of the funds were taken from a major agricultural development intended to tackle the country's chronic food shortages. Matata's lawyer says the ruling was unfair and politically motivated, even as he had served as Prime Minister of the DRC from 2012 to 2016 and now heads the country's Leadership and Governance for Development Party. Before his premiership, he was finance minister and received praise from the International Monetary Fund at the time for stabilizing the country's economy. Well, thousands of displaced people are seeking refuge in Uvira as the humanitarian crisis in the DRC deepens amid heightened tensions. And this is where Rwandan-backed M23 rebels continue to control parts of the region. According to reports, as many as 9,000 people have relocated to the South Kivu province located in eastern DRC, with many urging the government to find a peaceful solution to the crisis. Many of those displaced have been forced to find shelter in local churches and schools as increased fighting has seen villages evacuated and homes ruined. The deepening humanitarian crisis comes amid tentative ceasefire talks between the DRC and M23 members. In May, both sides resumed peace negotiations in Qatar in an effort to end fighting in the eastern region. We'll take a break now on the program. Still to come. Visually impaired football coaching enthusiasts to the pitch of Kenya under the Alive and Kicking initiative. It's introducing blind football in schools and community. Please stay with us.
Again with the latest Russia's invasion.
Welcome back to the program. It's been 3 days of transformative discussions as public relations professionals converged in Uyo, Akwa Ibom State for the 2025 NIPR week to reshape the public relations landscape. Over 1,000 delegates gathered to examine the critical role of effective communication in governance process as they seek ways to harness public relations for Nigerian economic relations. The Honorable Minister of Information and National Orientation, Alhaji Mohammed Idris, appeals to public relations professionals to key into ongoing efforts and reforms aimed at rebranding the nation's reputation and attracting investors into the country. The event also saw the installation of the chairman of the Channels Media Group, Dr. John Momo, as pioneer chairman of the Nigerian Reputation Management Group.
Chairman of the Channels Media Group, Dr. John Momo, arrives at the Government House in Uyo, the Akwa Ibom state capital, for a courtesy call on Governor Umar Eno, before heading to the venue of the 2025 Nigeria Public Relations Week.
How are you?
The governor commends Channels Television for its work in churning out unbiased national and international reports and distinguishing itself as a vanguard of truth and a voice of the people.
We just want to say thank you and want to let you know how much we admire what Channels is doing. Being a vanguard of truth and representing the people. Of course, they say you're the fourth estate of the realm. You watch for the people, the things you do on Channels, the truth you seek to pursue, the balanced story that we get. And sometimes, and again, you see that Channels just likes to present both sides if there are issues, and I've always watched with admiration.
Please be seated. Your Excellency.
Dr. Momo then joins more than 1,000 public relations professionals who converge on Uyo, Akwa Ibom State, for the 2025 Nigeria Public Relations Week. This annual event, the largest gathering of PR practitioners in the country, draws participants from all sectors, including various security agencies.
Chairman, Body of Advisors of the
President and Chairman of the Nigeria Institute of Public Relations Council, Dr. Ike Neliaku, emphasizes the critical role of effective communication in governmental success.
The challenge of leadership in Nigeria is partly due to lack of effective communication.
because leaders don't take responsibility in sharing their views and their visions with those they are leading. They assume that they know what the people want, and in some cases they fail to lead because they have not done their homework.
Representing the Akwa Ibom State government, the Deputy Governor, Senator Akon Eyakenyi, underscores the importance of public relations in shaping positive public opinion and fostering development.
Here in Akwa Ibom State, we have a robust relationship with the media and public relations practitioners. We see them as partners in our efforts to galvanize our people to arise and take charge of their destiny.
The Minister of Information, Mr. Mohammed Idris, assures participants that the federal government's ongoing reforms are designed to bolster the economy for the benefit of all citizens.
At a time that you are inviting the world to come to you, also be telling the world that your country is not ready for them. You cannot promote your country if you continue to say bad things about your country. Of course, constructive criticisms are always welcome. I'm calling on all Nigerians, the young and the old, the media professionals and everyone. We must come together and speak good about our country. This is the only country that we have.
On the 15th of
A significant highlight of the event is the installation of the chairman, Channels Media Group, Dr. Momo, as the pioneer chairman of the body of advisors, Nigeria Reputation Management Group.
I hereby proclaim and formally install Dr. John Reputation Momo, OON, FNIPR, as the pioneer chairman, body of advisors of the Nigerian Reputation Management Group.
Great innovation. A round of applause of the new birds, the new dawn.
While the Comptroller General of the Nigeria Customs Service, Mr. Adewale Adeniyi, is named Vice Chairman, and Mohammed Abubakar was appointed Secretary.
Our reputation is a collective asset. We must each do our part to protect it. That said, this collective effort must be matched by a serious, consistent commitment from those in leadership. We cannot build trust in Nigeria's image if those entrusted with the responsibility to govern do not lead by example. When institutions function with fairness and competence, citizens become the first ambassadors of their country. When leadership inspires trust, the people follow with pride. The credibility of a nation is only as strong as the credibility of its leaders.
The week also featured posthumous awards honoring deceased members of the NIPR.
Nigeria's Department of State Services has distanced itself from the controversial arrest of the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, Nnamdi Kanu, in Kenya, insisting its operations are limited strictly to Nigeria's territorial borders. This emerged during cross-examination of a prosecution witness with codename BBB, an intelligence officer from the DSS. Asked on the mode of intelligence gathering by the DSS, the witness noted that the sources are many, including human and social media, among others. And owing to their mode of training, DSS operatives have the capacity to get information where necessary. Probed further, the witness said he was told by Nnamdi Kanu that he was kidnapped from Kenya and returned to Nigeria in 2021. On the allegations that the DSS carried out the acts, Mr. BBB stated that the agency lacks the powers to effect arrest beyond Nigeria's borders. Mr. Kanu is facing terrorism-related charges brought by the federal government of Nigeria. Justice James Omotosho says he is granting an accelerated hearing of the case in the interest of all parties, particularly for Nnamdi Kanu, who has been in custody for too long. The judge also charged all parties in the case to act professionally to ensure progress. Justice Omotosho has adjourned the case till Thursday, the 22nd of May, for the conclusion of the cross-examination of the second prosecution witness. Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Yusuf Tuga, has extended warm greetings and congratulations to his Cameroonian counterpart, Lejeune Mbela, on the occasion of Cameroon's independence anniversary. The Nigerian government is commending Cameroon's commitment and collaboration in fostering stability in the region, particularly in the face of complex security threats, such as the activities of Boko Haram insurgents and other armed groups. Also, Nigeria is reaffirming its dedication to deepening the existing bonds of friendship and cooperation between the two nations. And finally on the program, in Kenya, visually impaired football enthusiasts took to the pitch as part of a specialized coaching program led by a social enterprise that deals with the manufacturing of balls, a live and kicking initiative, introducing blind football in schools and community centers across the East African country. The initiative project manager, Andrew Olo, says during matches, all players wear blindfolds, ensuring a level playing field between those who are fully blind and those with partial vision. He adds that by making noise while they move, sound balls enable players with visual impairments to locate and follow the ball during play. The game is played 5-a-side on a smaller pitch, 20 by 40 meters, with only the goalkeeper being sighted to help guide the team. According to reports, there are around 17,000 visually impaired children in Kenya, many of whom lack access to specialized education and inclusive recreational opportunities. Well, for them, sports often remains a distant dream. Well, the initiative says it's focused on training 82 sports teachers from 32 counties across the country, aiming to reach 4,000 students living with visual impairment. And that's it on the program for today. Thank you for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.